Okay, y'all. I am just enjoying cancer. I'm just kidding. I'm a marijuana guy, but this is the paperback edition, so that means I'm on the last chapter of the whole entire book. Part 3, chapter 7. I'm a few pages in. Unfortunately, while I was recording, my phone died, so I was able to get my phone up to 30% battery, so I'm gonna hurry up and try to read these 6 pages before my phone dies again. This will be the last video and the last part to the series of A Clockwork Orange. So I'm sorry, I stopped somewhere where it says where you could see that Alex is starting to, he's actually changing, you know. He found these new group of friends, but they're younger than him, and they're still kind of doing the same stuff, you know, just not as dangerous. They're like beating up people and robbing people, stupid stuff. But now he's older and he sees it from an older lens. It's kind of repetitive. It's kind of something he's been in before. So now I'm glad. It seems like he's wanting to get out of it. Where to then, asked Rick, because Alex is gonna leave. And then so Alex says, "That I know not," I said, "just to be on like my own and sort things out. You could video the old babukas were real puzzled at me going out like that, and like all morose, and not the bright and smeeking mouth cheeky wick you will remember." But I said, "Ah, to hell, and scattered out all of my Adinaki into the street," which is where the phone decided to, my battery died. It was dark, and there was a wind sharp as a Nas getting up, and there were very, very few looties out. There were these patrol cars with brutal roses inside them, like cruising about, and now and then on the corner you could video a couple of very young millicents stamping against the bitchy cold and letting out steam beneath on the winter air. Oh, my brothers, I suppose really a lot of old ultra-violence and crasting was dying out now, the roses being so brutal with who they caught, though it had become like a fight between naughty nadsats and the roses, who could be more scory with the Nas and the Britva and the stick and even the gun. But what was the matter with me these days was that I didn't like care much. It was like something soft getting into me, and I could not pony why. What I wanted these days I did not know. Even the music I liked to slushy in my old Malenki den were what I would have smacked at before, brothers. I was slushying more like Malenki romantic songs, what they call lead air, just a galas and a piano, very quiet and like yearning, different from when it had been all bolshy orchestras and me lying on the bed between the violins and trombones and kettle drums. There was something happening inside me, and I wonder if it was like some disease, or it was what they had done to me that time of setting my Gulliver and perhaps going to make me real bazumni. So thinking like this with my Gulliver bent and my rookers stuck in my trouser carmines, I walked the town, brothers, and at last I began to feel very tired and also in great need of a nice bolshy chasha, a milky chai. Thinking about this chai got a sudden like picture of me sitting before a bolshy fire in an armchair peeling away at this chai, and what was funny and very strange was that I seemed to have turned into a very starry Chalavic, about 70 years old, because I could vidi my own valas, which was very gray, and also had whiskers, and these were very gray too. I could vidi myself an old man sitting by the fire, and the light picture vanished. But it was very like strange. I came to one of these tea and coffee mestos, brothers, and I could vidi through the long, long window that it was full of very dull ludies, like ordinary, who had these very patient, expressionless litzos and would do no harm to no one, all sitting there and governing like quietly and peeling away at their nice, harmless chai and coffee. I ate it inside and went up to the counter and bought me a nice hot chai with plenty of Malacco. Then I eddied to one of these tables and sat down to peat it. There was a like young couple at this table, peating and smoking filter tip cancers and governing and smacking very quietly between themselves. But I took no notice of them and just went on peating away and like dreaming and wondering what it was in me that was like changing and what was going to happen to me. But I viddied that the Devaka at this table who was with his Chalavic was real horror show. Not the sort you would want to like throw down and give the old in and out to, but with a horror show plot and a litzo and a smiling rot and very, very fair valas and all that cow. And then the Vec with her, who had a hat on his Gulliver and had his litzo like turned away from me, swelled round to viddy the bullshit big clock they had on the wall in this mesto. And then I viddied who he was, and then he viddied who I was. It was Pete, one of my 3 droogs from those days when it was Georgie and Dim and him and me. It was Pete, like looking a lot older, though he cannot now be more than 19 and a bit, and he had a bit of a mustache and an ordinary day suit and his hat on. I said, well, droogie, what gives? Very, very long time, no viddy, he said. It's little Alex, isn't it? None other, I said. A long, long, long time since those dead and gone good days. And now poor Georgie, they told me, is underground, and old Dim is a brutal Millicent. Here is thou, and here is I, and what's news, how's thou, old Droogie? He talks funny, doesn't he? Said Devaka, like giggling. This, said Pete to the Devaka, is an old friend. His name is Alex. May I, he said to me, introduce my wife. My rot fell wide open. Wife, I like gaped. Wife, wife, wife. Oh no, that cannot be. Too young art thou to be married, old Droog. Impossible, impossible. This Devaka, who was like Pete's wife, impossible, impossible, giggled again and said to Pete, did you used to talk like that too? Well, said Pete, and Eli smiled. I'm nearly 20, old enough to be hitched, and it's been 2 months already. You were very young and very forward, remember? Well, I like gape still. Over this, get can I not? Old Droogie, Pete married. Well, well, well. We have a small flat, said Pete. I'm earning very small money at State Marine Insurance, but things will get better, that I know. And Georgina here. What again is that name? I said. Rot still open like Bazoonie. Pete's wife. Wife, brothers, like giggled again. Georgina, said Pete. Georgina works too, typing, you know, we manage. I could not, brothers, take my glasses off him, really. He was like grown up now with a grown up glass and all. You must, said Pete, come and see us sometime. You still, he said, look very young despite all your terrible experiences. Yes, 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 we read all about them, but of course you are very still young. 18, I said, just gone. 18, I said, Pete, as old as that. Well, 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 now, he said, we have to be going. And he like gave this Georgina of his a little loving look and pressed one of her rookers between his, and she gave him one of these looks back. Oh, my brothers, yes, said Pete, turning back to me. We're off to a little party at Greg's. Greg, I said. Oh, of course, said Pete. You wouldn't know Greg, would you? Greg is after your time. While you were away, oh no. While you were away, Greg came into the picture. He runs little parties, you know, mostly wine cup and word games, but very nice, very pleasant, you know, harmless, if you see what I mean. Yes, I said harmless. Yes, yes, I viddy that real horror show. And this Georgina Devaka giggled again at my slavos, and then she too iddied off to their Vani word games at this Greg's, whoever he was. I was left all on my Arinaki with my milky chai. This was getting cold now, like thinking and wondering. Perhaps that was it, I kept thinking. Perhaps I was getting too old for the sort of Disney I had been leading, brothers. I was 18 now, just gone. 18 was not a young age. At 18, old Wolfgang Amadeus had written concertos and symphonies and operas and oratorios and all that cow. No, not cow, heavenly music. And then there was old Felix M. with his Midsummer Night's Dream overture. And there were others, and there was this light French poet set by old Benj Britt, who had done all his best poetry by age of 15. Oh, my brothers, Arthur his first name. 18 was not at all that young in age, but what was I going to do? Walking the dark, chill bastards of winter streets after eating off from this chai and coffee mess, so I kept videoing like visions, like these cartoons and gazettas. There was your humble narrator, Alex, coming home from work to a good hot plate of dinner, and there was this petitza all welcoming and greeting like loving. But I could not video her all that horror show, brothers. I could not think who it might be, but I had this sudden, very strong idea that if I walked into the room next to this room where the fire was burning away and my hot dinner laid on the table, there I should find what I really wanted. And now it all tied up. That picture scissored out of the Gazette of meeting old Pete like that. From that other room in a cot was laying gurgling, goo goo goo, my son. Yes, 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 brothers, my son. And I felt this bullshit big hollow inside my plot, feeling very surprised too at myself. I knew what was happening, oh my brothers. I was growing up. Yes, yes, there it was. Youth must go. Ah, yes. But youth is only being in a way like it might be an animal. But youth is only being in a way like it might be an animal. No, it is not just like being an animal so much as being like one of these Malenki toys you viddy being sold in the streets. Like little chalovics made out of tin and with a spring inside and then a winding handle on the outside, and you wind it up, grr, 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 and off it itties, like walking. Oh my brothers, but it itties in a straight line and bangs straight into things, bang, bang, and it cannot help what it's doing. Being young is like being one of these Malenki machines. My son, when I had my son, I would explain all that to him when he was starry enough to like understand. But then I knew he would not understand or would not want to understand at all and would do all the veshes I had done. Yes, perhaps even killing some poor starry Pharrella surrounded with mewing cats and Koshkas, and I would not be able to really stop him. And nor would he be able to stop his own son, brothers, and so it would iddy on to like the end of the world, round and round and round like some bullshit gigantic like Chelovic, like Old Bog himself, by Courage to See, a Korova milk bar. Turning and turning and Bonnie could have. My son, when I had my son, I would explain all that to him when he was starry enough to like understand, but that I knew he would not understand or would not want to understand at all and would do all the veshes I had done, yes, perhaps even some killing poor story Pharrella surrounded by mewing cots in Kashkas, and I would not be able to really stop him, nor would he be able to stop his own son, brothers, and so would Idion to like end of the world, round and round and round like some bullshit gigantic Chalovik, like old Bog himself, by courtesy of Korova Milk Bar, turning and turning and turning a Vonnie grassy orange in his gigantic rookers. But first of all, brothers, there was this Vesha finding some Devaka or other who would be a mother to this son. I would have to start on that tomorrow, I kept thinking. That was something like new to do. That was something I would have to get started. A new like chapter beginning. That's what it's going to be then, brothers, as I come to the like end of this tale. You have been everywhere with your little droog Alex suffering with him, and you have viddied some of the most grasny brackneys old bog ever made, all onto your old droog Alex. And all it was that I was young, but now as I end this story, brothers, I'm not young, no longer, oh no. Alex life groweth up, oh yes. But where I itty now, oh my brothers, is all on my Adinaki where you cannot go. Tomorrow is all like sweet flowers and the turning Vani earth and the stars and the old Luna up there and your old Droog Alex all in his Adinaki, seeking like a mate, and all that cow. A terrible Grasny Vani world, really, oh my brothers. And so farewell from your little Droog, and to all others in this story, profound shooms of lip music burr, and they can kiss my cherries. But you, oh my brothers, remember sometimes thy little Alex that was. Amen, and all that kill. This new American edition of Clockwork Orange, the author so forcibly puts into his introduction, is longer by one chapter than the last. The chapter was included in the original British edition but dropped from the American edition, therefore from Stanley Kubrick's film version. The author and his American publisher was delighted to give his fascinating book a new and larger life, differ in their memories as to whether or not the dropping of the last chapter, which changed the book's impact dramatically, was a condition of publishing or merely a suggestion made for conceptual reasons. Whichever is true, the larger truth is that A Clockwork Orange is a modern classic which must indeed be made available to Anthony Burgess's American readers precisely in the form he wishes it to be. It is to be done. A Clockwork Orange. So I read the, what do you call it? I read the publisher's note. And I will go back and read the, A Clockwork Orange is Orange Resucked. I first published the novella A Clockwork Orange in 1962, which ought to be far enough in the past for it to be erased from the world's literary memory. It refuses to be erased, however, and for this the film version of the book made by Stanley Kubrick may be held chiefly responsible. I should myself be glad to disown it for various reasons, but this is not permitted. I receive mail from students who try to write theses about it, requests from Japanese dramaturges to turn into a sort of no play. It seems likely to survive, while other works of mine that I value more bite the dust. This is not an unusual experience for an artist. Rachmaninoff used to groan because he was known mainly for a prelude in C sharp minor, which he wrote as a boy, while the works of his maturity never got into the programs. Kids cut their pianistic teeth on a minute in G, which Beethoven composed only so that he could detest it. Kids cut their pianistic teeth on a minute in G, which Beethoven composed only so that he could detest it. I have to go on living with the Clockwork Orange, and this means I have a sort of authorial duty to it. I have a very special duty to it in the United States, and I better not explain what this duty is. Let me put the situation boldly. A Clockwork Orange has never been published entire in America. The book I wrote is divided in 3 sections of 7 chapters each. Take out your pocket calculator and you will find that these add up to a total of 21 chapters. This is a symbol of human maturity, or used to be, since at 21 you got the vote and assumed adult responsibility. Whatever its symbology, the number 21 was the number I started out with. Novelists of my stamp are interested in what it is called arithmology, meaning that number has to mean something in human terms when they handle it. The number of chapters is never entirely arbitrary. Just as a musical composer starts off with a vague image of bulk and duration, so a novelist begins with an image of length. And this image is expressed in the number of sections, and the number of chapters into which the work would be disposed. Those 21 chapters were important to me, but they were not important to me. They were not important to my New York publisher. The book he brought out had only 20 chapters. He insisted on cutting out the 21st. I could, of course, have demurred at this and taken my book elsewhere, but it was considered that he was being charitable in accepting the work at all, and that all other New York or Boston publishers would kick out manuscript on his dog ear. I needed money back in 1961. Even the pittance I was being offered as an advance And if the condition of the book's acceptance was also in truncation, well, so be it. So there was a profound difference between A Clockwork Orange, as Great Britain knows it, and the somewhat slimmer volume that bears the same name in the United States of America. Let us go further. The rest of the world was sold the book out of Great Britain, and so most versions, certainly the French, Italian, Spanish, Catalan, Russian, Hebrew, Romanian, and German translations have the original 21 chapters. Now, when Stanley Kubrick made this film, though he made it in England, he followed the American version, and so it seemed to his audiences outside America. Ended the story somewhat prematurely. Audiences did not exactly clamor for their money back, but they wondered why Kubrick left out the denouement. People wrote to me about this. Indeed, much of my later life has been expended on Xeroxing statements of intention and the frustration of intention, while both Kubrick and my New York publisher coolly bask in the rewards of their misdemeanor. Life is, of course, terrible. What happens in the 21st chapter? You have the chance to find out. Briefly, my young thuggish protagonist grows up. He grows bored with violence and recognizes that human energy is better expended on creation than destruction. Senseless violence is a prerogative of youth, which has much energy but little talent for constructive. Its dynamism has to find an outlet in smashing telephone kiosks, derailing trains, stealing cars and smashing them, and of course in the much more satisfactory activity of destroying human beings. There comes a time, however, when violence is seen as juvenile and boring. It is a repertoire of the stupid and ignorant. My young hoodlum comes to see the revelation of need to get something done in life, to marry, to beget children, to keep the orange of the world turning in the rookers of Bog, or hands of God, and perhaps even create something, music, say. After all, Mozart and Mendelssohn were composing deathless music in their teens or nutsets, and all my hero was doing was razzing and giving the old in out. It was with a kind of shame that this growing youth looks back on his devastating past. He wants a different kind of future. There was no hint of this change of intention in the 20th chapter. The boy is conditioned and reconditioned, and he foresees with the glee of resumption of the operation of free and violent will. It was cured all right, he says, and so the American book ends. So the film ends too. The 21st chapter gives the novel the quality of genuine fiction and art founded on the principle that human beings change. There is, in fact, not much point in writing a novel unless you can show the possibility of moral transformation, or an increase in wisdom, operating in your chief character or characters. Even trashy bestsellers show people changing. When a fictional work fails to show change, when it merely indicates that human characters set, stony, unregenerable, then you're out of field of the novel, and in that, the fable or the allegory. The American or Kubrickian orange is a fable. The British or world one is a novel. Kubrickian. The American or Kubrickian orange is a fable. The British or world one is a novel. But my New York publisher believed that my 21st chapter was a sellout. It was very, very British, didn't you know? It was bland, and it showed a Pelagian unwillingness to accept that a human being could be a model of unregenerable evil. The Americans, he said, in effect, were tougher than the British and could face up to reality. Soon they will be facing up to it in Vietnam. My book was Canadian and accepted the notion of moral progress. Okay, I get what he's saying. What was really wanted was a Nixonian book with no shred of optimism in it. Let us all have evil prancing on the page and up to the very last line, sneering in the face of all the inherited beliefs, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, and holy roller, about people being able to make themselves better. Such a book would be sensational, and so it is. I do not think it is a fair picture of human life. I do not think so because by definition, a human being is endowed with free will. He can use this to choose between good and evil. If he can only perform good or only perform evil, then he is a clockwork orange, meaning that he has the appearance of an organism lovely with color and juice, but in fact only a clockwork toy to be wound up by God or the devil, since this is increasingly replacing both the almighty state. It is as inhuman to be totally good as it is to be totally evil. The important thing is moral choice. Evil has to exist along with good in order that moral choice may operate. Evil has to exist. Life is sustained by the grinding opposition of moral entities. This is what the television news is all about. Unfortunately, there is so much original sin in us all that we find evil rather attractive. To devastate is easier and more spectacular than to create. We like to have the pants scared off us by visions of cosmic destruction. To sit down in an adult room and compose Missa Solemnis or the Anatomy of Melancholy does not make headlines or news flashes. Unfortunately, my little squib of a book was found attractive to many because it was an odorous as a crate full of bad eggs with a miasma of original sin. It seems priggish or Pollyanna-ish to deny that my intention in writing the work was to titillate the nastier propensities of my readers. My own healthy inheritance of original sin comes out in the book, and I enjoyed raping and ripping by proxy. It is the novelist's innate cowardice that makes him depute to imaginary personalities the sins that he is too cautious to commit for himself. But the book does also have a moral lesson. It is the weary traditional one of the fundamental importance of moral choice. It is because this lesson sticks out like a sore thumb that I tend to disparage A Clockwork Orange as a work too didactic to be artistic. It is not the novelist's job to preach. It is his duty to show. I have shown enough, though the curtain of an invented lingo gets in the way. Another aspect of my cowardice. Nadzat, a Russified version of English, was meant to muffle the raw response we expect from pornography. It turns the book into a linguistic adventure. People prefer the film because they are scared, rightly, of language. I don't think I have to remind readers what the title means. Clockwork Oranges don't exist, except in the speech of old Londoners. The image was a bizarre one, always used for a bizarre thing. He's as queer as a clockwork orange, meant he was queer to the limit of queerness. It did not primarily denote homosexuality, though a queer, before restrictive legislation came in, was a term used for a member of the inverted fraternity. Europeans who translated the title as Arancia or Orologaria or Orange Mechanica cannot understand its Cockney resonance, and they assume that it meant a hand grenade, a cheaper kind of explosive pineapple. I meant it to stand for the application of a mechanistic morality to a living organism oozing with juice and sweetness. I mean it to stand for the application of a mechanistic morality to a living organism oozing with juice and sweetness. Readers of the 21st chapter must decide for themselves whether it enhances the book they presumably know is really a discardable limb. I meant the book to end this way, but my aesthetic judgment may have been faulty. Writers are rarely their own best critics, nor are critics. Quod scripsi scripsi, said Pontius Pilate when he made Jesus Christ the King of Jews. What I have written, I have written. We can destroy what we have written, but we cannot unwrite it. I leave what I wrote with what Dr. Johnson called frigid indifference to the judgment of that 0.00000001 of the American population which cares about such things. Eat this Swedish segment or spit it out. You are free. November 1986. I'm so glad my phone died, I was able to charge it to 30. Now it just told me I'm under 20%. Shout out to my friends. I'm looking at myself in the eyes. I always do that. You probably know. I'm looking at it like it's a mirror. Flipped around with the big screen on your phone. But man, this book is really good. I'm so glad that I was able to read I read the introduction, but at the end I wrote what is it? Something's notes. It's cool they didn't even put too much. I like the publisher's notes, and that's what made me want to go back, because the publisher's notes is very small, and that's what made me want to go back to the introduction. Nigga, go the other way, my nigga. I don't mean to say it like that. Cross the, Okay, so I read the publisher's notes at the end. He seemed like a cool dude though, man. I ain't gonna lie. It seemed like, you look like it was my cousin JJ walking by. But I love y'all. It was like probably like a young 20-year-old Hispanic dude just walking by. Cause where I'm at, you could either, there's like a little crosswalk you could take, or you could walk across the street. And I don't know. I decided, oh, you parked right here, you don't really want to walk across the street, so we just took the little tunnel. But so I read the publisher's note at the end, and I'm so glad I did, and because it told me about how something about a chapter not being in there, and then so it made me go back to the introduction, because it said the author spoke about a chapter not being in a book, that the publisher took out a chapter of his book. And man, the last chapter of the book pretty much says he changed, because it's crazy, because I guess when it was first published it had 21 chapters, but in America they took away that last chapter, and the last chapter tells you he changed. And it's crazy to say, because the video prior to this, it dies before the last chapter, you get me? So I'm able to make a small video right here and have enough power to even explain this, that in the introduction, this book America, when they wanted to publish it, they wanted to publish it only 20 chapters. And that's the most confusing chapter, is the 20th chapter, because it's like when the other doctor comes in who was like the minister of interior or inferior. It's funny how he would say that, interior or inferior, because they're like, I don't know, they're trying to use their superiority towards your inferiority, which sometimes you could even look at it, that makes them really inferior, you know, to a certain point of view. But so I get it, what he was talking about, but this was written in 1961, and even this introduction is pretty, it's pretty, he's saying like America wanted, like America at that time was more of a, all about war and kind of being that vicious person, I guess, to use it. But the last chapter of him changing and him like, even I was like disappointed in the last chapters, like, oh, he's hanging out with these 3 kids, you know, he's hanging out with these 3 younger kids. And as you keep reading towards the end, you realize that Alex was a young kid, you know, he was younger than even Dim and Georgie and Pete, you know. And so, and then now he's older and he has these other guys, one guy named Bully, you know, it's all about the names that you give yourself, even in the street, you know. That wasn't, like, I'm sure his name wasn't Bully, and I can't remember the other guy's name. So the new friends that he decided, just, he was over it. And it's funny how he even ran into his other buddy, old buddy Pete, who decided, when he met him, he's now married, and you know, he's living slow. He's like repentive. You feel what I'm saying? And like, man, I can imagine reading this like the very first time and feeling like, damn, this book. Like, if you smoke some weed and you read this book and you see how they were like hurting people and raping them and just stealing from them, it makes you think like, damn, there was a good people and they're just breaking into their houses and hurting them. And just the way they write at the end, and even the writing in the introduction was not part of the story but added to the story's commentary. So this book is actually pretty dope, man. Like, at first it was kind of slow. I didn't like, it felt like it was just like, oh, just a troublemaking book. But then at the end, I don't know, I just, from that doubt, I said, I'm gonna try not to doubt it, you know. So Clockwork Orange, y'all. Clockwork Orange, the last chapter with the introduction. Now I can add that to the title of the thing, which is really cool. So I'm probably gonna go to the library right now, let my phone charge, head to my house and upload these videos. Peace.